We're going to lead off this hour with a live look at Ottawa and Washington, two capitals, one summit. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and President Joe Biden will have a face-to-face, one-on-one meeting this afternoon. Now, because of the pandemic, it will be online. But let's look to both sides of the story today with senior Washington editor Lindsay Duncombe on the right of your screen in Washington and Janice McGregor in Ottawa. If you would, Lindsay, just stand by for a moment because I'd like to begin with Janice to look ahead to 4 o'clock this afternoon, Janice, and what we can expect from the meeting and the agenda.
Well, you know, Heather, they say that since we've all been doing so many virtual meetings, people are working more efficiently, getting things done in a shorter period of time. When you look at the leaders' itineraries, this 4 o'clock meeting is not a long one. The two leaders speaking together for about 50 minutes before other members of their cabinet that are involved on cross-border files will join them. And we're expecting a joint statement out by 5:45. So really not a terribly long agenda overall. Much of the communique probably worked out by officials in advance as these things go. But I think, you know, the most important thing about today, and certainly what everyone's talking about and pointing us to, is the tone. Yes, there is nothing normal about having to do this critical first early meeting between Canada and the U.S. Virtually, not face-to-face or in person. But frankly, everything else about this meeting is meant to be horribly normal, getting back to business as usual for these two countries. And yes, there are disagreements between them, and they have kind of started to engage on specific processes to deal with their arguments about things like softwood lumber and dairy imports and so on. But, you know, overall, I think the days where there was an appetite for this to be a competitive zero-sum kind of fight are over. These are two leaders who want this to be a mutually beneficial alliance. And I think that's what we're going to hear today, what they have in common: pandemic recovery, climate change, equity and diversity, these kind of commitments that they share and that they're hoping to kind of get a win-win if they work together on.
Janice, thank you. Stand by, if you would, for just a moment. I want to bring in Lindsay here on all of that. You heard Lindsay, Janice saying a mutually beneficial alliance, one of the goals here, one of underlining that today with the discussions. But in terms of arguments and disagreements, what could happen?
Well, one of the things we've been waiting for is what does this Buy American executive order and plan to have procurement in the federal government here in the United States focus increasingly on American manufacturing. What does that mean for Canada, Heather? Canada has been hoping for, asking for an exemption to these new rules that are currently being looked at and studied. So far, there has been nothing from the White House about whether or not that is possible. That is something that the two leaders are likely to discuss again today. The other thing that will come up is the relationship with China and will the commitment of the Biden administration to help in releasing the two Michaels who have been in captivity in that country. I don't think that we're going to get a specific detailed strategy on how the countries will work together on that, although the ambassador the Canadian ambassador to the United States has said in every conversation with the new administration, the two Michaels has come up. At the briefing at the White House yesterday, Heather, Jen Psaki, the press secretary, was asked what kind of specific commitments Canada could expect on this issue. She sort of dodged in her answer. Here's what she said.
The Prime Minister will bring up whatever he would like to bring up, as is true of any bilateral meeting. We expect the President during the meeting to highlight the strong and deep partnership between the United States and Canada as neighbors, friends, and NATO allies, that they will discuss issues of mutual interest from COVID-19 to climate change and the economic ties that bind our countries, as well as the deep people-to-people bonds we share.
that normal sounding boilerplate, let's get back to arguing about softwood sentiment coming from the White House is not just aimed at a Canadian audience or even a domestic one. This first real meeting with a foreign leader is a signal to the rest of the world that traditional alliances are back in the United States and that the U.S. now intends to take a leadership role on those issues, moving away from the Trump era of drama and insult.
Okay. Thank you so much. Lindsay Duncombe, our senior Washington editor there. Janice, come back in if you would on all of this. You heard Lindsay saying perhaps exemptions for Buy American, help on the China file and the two Michaels. In Ottawa, what's the perspective in terms of what the Prime Minister wants to come from this meeting?
Well, look, I don't think anyone's under any illusion that some of these complicated situations can be resolved in an hour-long meeting or even in a day. What is going to emerge from this, I think, is more of a to-do list, something focused kind of on the process for fixing this rather than any kind of specific tangible progress out of the talks per se. We hear the word roadmap being floated in Washington, as the most likely outcome. But as Lindsay says, the Canadian government for 4 years dealt with a lot of stress and confusion with its most important trading partner and its most important security ally. It must be a real relief to get back to a more workmanlike, collegial approach, even a technical one on some of these files after kind of the real sense of heightened anxiety, frankly, that came with dealing with the Trump administration. And for that, I think at a time when there's a lot of other things to feel anxious about, I suspect the Canadian government is grateful.
Thank you, Janice and Lindsay. Appreciate both of your reporting. Janice there in Ottawa.